Hello, everyone, and welcome. While this session has been pre-recorded, please feel free to comment or ask questions in the live chat, which you will find in the GoToWebinar questions panel. Be assured that we are monitoring and will either respond during the live session or we will follow up with you personally shortly after. While we give another minute to those who are still logging on, let me take this opportunity to ask for your input on future webinars. What topics would you like to delve into? That's what I'd like to know. What problems are keeping you up at night? Maybe it's something related to pre or post boarding. Are you interested in more industry trends, transaction laundering? Those are just a few general examples to get you thinking, but please do let us know in the chat how we can help and what you'd like to hear about. Now, for those who joined while I was encouraging participation via the chat, I'll give a micro recap. While this session has been pre-recorded, please go ahead and use the GoToWebinar questions panel to make comments or ask questions. We are monitoring it closely and will respond live or follow up with you shortly after. We'll go ahead now and get started as people continue to join. With that, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this session about new card brand rules. My name is Annie and I will be moderating today. Now, before we jump in, it's important to note that we do not work for Visa, MasterCard, or any of the other payment networks, and we do not speak for their brands or companies. The discussion today and presentation materials do not constitute legal or other professional advice. So with that being said, let's cover some housekeeping. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please submit them in the GoToWebinar questions panel, or if you prefer a less public channel, just drop an email to marketing@g2llc.com. Again, that's marketing@g2llc.com. I check it personally, so consider it the Annie hotline. Next, in your GoToWebinar panel, in the handout section, you can download this presentation deck and some additional resources, so make sure to check that out before the session is over. And lastly, this recording will be sent to all registrants and it will be posted within a week on our website. Moving on to introductions, I'm truly delighted to introduce Shari Savlik and Jamie Bello. Many of you may already know Shari, as she is currently serving as president of the board for the Association of Payment Professionals, previously known as MAC, and has been an active member for 15 years. But Jamie is almost certainly a new face to all of you, as she is a G2 analyst. Collectively, she and her team would be more known for their quiet expertise than being front and center on a webinar. First, backing up for a moment, for those of you who haven't yet actually had the pleasure of meeting Shari, let me paint a picture. She has 23 years industry experience, with 19 of those years at Merrick Bank on the acquiring side. As the head of the Merchant Compliance Department, she's responsible for regulatory merchant compliance and operational integrity for the Merchant Services Business Unit of Merrick Bank. And she has extensive experience in matters relating to a long list of things, which include regulatory compliance, PCI DSS compliance, underwriting and risk analysis of registered high-risk merchants, third-party diligence, oversight, and registration requirements, Section 6050W of the IRS Code, CPP breach, suspected breach events, project management, data integrity, and enterprise risk management. And to top that off, earlier in her career, she worked on the issuing side with one of Merrick's sister companies. And I gotta tell you, all honestly, in preparing for this session, I've been overwhelmed at times with her encyclopedic knowledge of the industry, so be prepared to buckle up. And as the perfect complement, we have G2's own Jamie Bello, who brings a unique point of view to this discussion. Obviously, we'll be talking about MCC codes, and she's on the front lines every day. Jamie is a senior analyst with 6 years of experience in the payments industry, specific to KYC and MCC research. KYC, of course, stands for Know Your Customer, and MCC is Merchant Category Codes. Her capability in KYC allows her to navigate complex compliance requirements and help organizations minimize risk. And then her knowledge on proficiency in MCC enables her to effectively classify merchants and categorize transactions which provides valuable insights for businesses looking to optimize their operations and streamline reporting, which is probably why you're here today. And as for me, I'm Annie Beringer, the Director of Product Marketing at G2. While my title has the word marketing in it, my role sits between product, sales, client services, and marketing. Essentially, my job is to connect with all of you, and what keeps me up at night is wondering what's on your mind. How can I help? And I'll take this opportunity to say that any and all of you who are up for a short 10 to 15 minute chat about your unique challenges, I'd love to talk to you and would really welcome the call. So my email will be listed at the end of this session, but it's easy. You can either reach me at the marketing@g2llc.com, or my own direct email is annie.beringer@g2llc.com. And again, I'd love to talk to you. Before moving on, let me extend a heartfelt thank you to Shari and Jamie and to all of you for taking your time to be here. Now, with all that said, let's jump into the discussion. Some of the changes to the rules that we'll discuss today relate to MCCs, in fact, a lot of it, and it's likely that not every one of you on the call is an MCC expert, so we're opening with a brief overview. We'll cover what are they and why do they matter in order to lay a foundation for the rest of the session. Then we'll move on to the second section, which will shed light on what does an MCC analyst actually do. Then we'll dive into the heart of the matter, highlighting rule changes and refinements that you might want to pay particular attention to and why. Notably, we won't cover every rule change, just highlights. Again, we don't make the rules and there are too many nuances to cover in this short time. But again, please let us know in the chat if you have specific questions or want to hear more on any particular topic. To kick off our overview of MCC basics, I'll hand it over to Jamie to start with a definition. So Jamie, want to tell us about what MCCs are?
Yeah, of course, Annie. I just want to say I'm really happy to be here discussing MCCs with all of you. So what are they? MCCs are merchant category codes, and they're used to classify a merchant's business model by the goods or the services that they provide. For example, a merchant could be classified as a restaurant, an online clothing store, or even a smoke shop, plus over 800 other options. So that's the quick description of what MCCs are. As to why they matter, I'm going to turn it over to Shari, who, as an acquirer, lives and breathes the importance of MCCs every day. Shari, would you like to take it from here?
Thanks, Jamie. Thank you for that lead in, and thank you, Annie, for that introduction that I certainly hope I can live up to. I will echo everything you said, Jamie, and I will add to that, from an acquirer's perspective, MCCs drive pricing, underwriting, and risk requirements, program identifications, data integrity, and there are even some card brand specific billing programs that need an MCC for qualification. Think MasterCard location fee, which excludes specifically merchants that are categorized under MCC 8398, charitable organizations, and MCC 8661, religious organizations. As to why attention is on MCCs now, I think from an acquiring perspective, we've always had this on our radar. This isn't a new phenomenon, which is why we know where fraud likes to lurk. However, there's new scrutiny on this area that's coming from card brand enforcement. There certainly have been changes to the rules around MCCs over the last couple of years, and as a direct result of those changes, there's further enforcement that's being seen now. And I hope that gives some context around why MCCs are so important. Annie, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you both, Shari and Jamie, for giving that great baseline. Now, after hearing Shari explain the importance of MCCs, we'll turn our focus to understanding the level of expertise and attention to detail that's required to accurately assign MCC codes. To help with that, I'll turn it back over to Jamie.
Thanks, Annie. So as I was thinking about how to prepare for this session, I actually thought of my own family's small business. My partner and I started a pop-up shop selling Hawaiian shave ice here in the Seattle area. That doesn't at all sound high risk, right? In fact, our MCC code is 5814 for fast food restaurants, which falls in the low risk category. But if we expanded or switched over to selling online packaged syrups, then the business model changes. For example, if we add alcohol to the packaged syrups, then the risk goes up and the code would change to 5921 packaged stores, beer, wine, and liquor, a high risk category. And there you have how my family's business turns into a great example of what I do on a daily basis. As to what I do at a high level, our team at G2 reviews each merchant's website to identify, verify, and assign an MCC code, providing the MCC code name, description, and a risk type. To look at the specifics of how we do this, imagine for a moment that you have just signed up for G2's MCC check service, and I'm the analyst working on your account. The process from there breaks down into basically 3 steps. Step 1 is getting your merchant data into the G2 system. Typically, you would send G2 an Excel file that includes key fields like merchant name, merchant URL, and address information. Since the fields that I receive vary slightly from client to client, I then transfer that data into a G2 template, which is a spreadsheet with specific columns like the one at the top of this slide. The screenshot is a simplified version to highlight the most important columns, which I mentioned a moment ago. But an actual MCC check report would of course include more data. Step 2 is the research. I start at the top of the list and work my way down, drilling into each merchant's website, checking to see what goods or services they may be providing to the consumer, and then identifying if the assigned MCC is the most appropriate. On the bottom of the slide, you see a few examples. All of them were actual merchants provided to G2 for an MCC check. The first one, under the seemingly benign column, came to us with a miscellaneous health medical code, but turned out to be a very typical shoe repair store with no connections to health and or medical services, not even orthotics. So we assigned the obvious MCC code for 7251 for shoe repair. In the second column, the merchant provided 5331 for variety stores, which is a common low risk code, but this merchant was actually a liquor store falling under the high risk MCC code 5921. The third example is for a merchant that listed 5977 for a cosmetic store, but they actually had a pharmacy placing them in 5912, which is not only a high risk category, but if not carefully monitored, could lead to potential violations. Now, all of those examples relate to step 2 of the overall process, which is to do the research. Step 3 is the final and easiest step on my end, which is to share the information back to you so that you can reassign or further investigate according to your own internal guidelines and processes. So when I log on each day, I think of myself as an extension of your team. I work in the background using my experience and knowledge of MCC codes to give your team the information they need to assign the most accurate MCCs.
Yeah, so Jamie, this is really great. And to underscore your point about finding accurate MCCs, I'd like to bring everyone's attention to the column labeled seemingly benign. You'll see MCC 8099 in the first row, which is a miscellaneous category. And the miscellaneous categories are important to understand. They get their very own slide. But before we get into the meat of it, and before I hand it back over to Jamie, we have a little quiz. The question, which code should the merchant who sells this dog statue and other miscellaneous items be assigned? While Jamie clarifies some nuances of miscellaneous MCCs, go ahead and put your guess in the chat. And Jamie, now I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Annie, for that lead in. For those of you who may be newer to the world of MCC codes, the ones ending with 2 9s or 3 9s like 8099 or 8999, those indicate a miscellaneous bucket. It's important to understand miscellaneous codes because you most likely have a lot of them in your portfolio. Merchants improperly bucketed into miscellaneous categories can represent lost revenue, and they're also an easy place for fraud to hide, which can potentially mask significant risk for payment network violations and assessments. As you look at MCCs in your portfolio, remember that the goal is to assign the most accurate, most specific MCC possible. So challenges that you'll run into include that some MCCs are more specific than others, and that a merchant can fall under more than one category. The examples on this slide are pulled from G2 clients who provided us with a more general MCC. And after further investigating their businesses, we assigned a more specific code. You can see in the first example of how plumbing and heating equipment could also fit in the 5099 code for durable goods. But note that the 5099 description also says not elsewhere classified. It turns out that plumbing and heating equipment indeed has a more specific code, so it's better to use the 5074 MCC code. The second example of the candy store shows a much similar situation and illustrates how common it is to use a more general miscellaneous code, even when there's a more accurate code available. And then the last example is interesting because you'll see that there is no 99 in either code, but you can see that the Hyatt Hotel can logically fall under the general 7011 code for lodging, but the code specific to the Hyatt is naturally the correct code to use. So what's important here is that the 7011 code does not include the word miscellaneous in the description, yet it acts as a miscellaneous bucket for lodging providers. So when reviewing your merchant portfolio, you can't just scan for the 99 codes. It really takes someone looking closely, understanding the codes, knowing what to look for, and then researching the merchant's offerings to determine the best MCC code. So I hope that helps. And now, Annie, I'll turn it back over to you.
That was great, Jamie. Thank you. And before we move on, thanks also to all of those who put guesses in the chat or, knowing that this was pre-recorded, made a mental guess. As for me, I think the merchant selling this dog statue, getting back to our question, would land in 5331 variety stores. So I'm curious about the two of you, Shari and Jamie. What do you think?
I'll start there, Annie. Working in compliance, I feel it my duty to say that I'd be very interested to know anyone who put an actual guess in the chat of an MCC, what do they do for a living? And I'm going to bet that it's not underwriting. And the reason I say that is because if I had to venture a guess from looking at a picture, I would say 5931 thrift stores or secondhand stores. However, if you are basing MCC on nothing more than a photo, I have follow-up questions.
I definitely agree with that code, Shari. I was thinking the same code for secondhand stores, but you're right. Like, we can't tell based off of just this one picture. There could be liquor hiding in the background, or cigars or cigarettes hiding if we enlarge that picture. So we'd never know.
That's a great point. Or maybe this is the closet of a dollar store, which would be legitimately 5999.
That's true.
And I gotta say, I love the discussion, mostly because it underscores one of the points mentioned earlier, which is that a merchant can fall under more than one category, and it may not be obvious which one it is. And it certainly sounds like it wouldn't be obvious from a picture. So, well, I hope those of you who are in attendance enjoyed our little quiz. We certainly did. And this, I think, is a good time to move on to our next section. So, taking things from a high-level overview and now drilling down into a little bit more detail, Shari, I'm hoping you would go ahead and talk about what's new in the MCC world, especially from your perspective as an acquirer.
Absolutely, Annie, I'd love to. I think right now, a lot of attention is on Visa because they recently published the Visa VIRP, which is the Visa Integrity Risk Program, which is the program that has now replaced GBPP, the Global Brand Protection Program. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about VIRP, though I also want to make sure that we are aware that Visa is following suit with changes that MasterCard made back in late 2021, particularly around adult content and acquirer obligations in that regard. There was a lot of attention on MasterCard in late 2021, early 2022, when MasterCard started referring to specific words are hard, specific high-risk segments as specialty risk merchants. and created a new set of certificate guidelines around adult content specifically, and even more stringent criteria around those certifications when the content was user-driven versus studio-produced. So at this point, halfway through 2023, the MasterCard changes are all had. We don't need to spend a lot of time talking about them in this conversation. I just wanted to point out that when it comes to things like certification language, MasterCard made this move first, and a lot of this is Visa following suit.
That's a great point. So now that we know what's new, can you tell us a little bit about what hasn't changed with the new VIRP versus the prior GBPP?
I'm so glad you asked that. I always like to open with what's the same before I start jumping down the rabbit hole of things that are different. VIRP in particular is noticeably thicker than GBPP for those old school folks like me who actually print it. That does not necessarily make it scarier. There's a reason it's thicker, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. For now, I think it's really important to remember that the purpose remains the same, which is to ensure that acquirers maintain proper controls over their merchant acquiring operations and protect the integrity of the payment space for all stakeholders, not just the payment networks, but ourselves as sponsor banks and our ISOs and our merchants from any illegal or brand damaging content.
Yeah, great perspective. So knowing that the objective is the same, you mentioned VIRP is thicker than GBPP. Can you talk to us a little bit about why it's thicker, even if it's not, as you say, scarier?
Yes, we can certainly unpack that a little bit. First, let's figure out why it's taking up so many pages. The GBPP had a bulleted list of 11 MCCs that were previously referred to as high brand risk, or HBR. The new VIRP now has 13 MCCs identified, and the new name for this grouping of MCCs is high integrity risk, or HIR. Now, there's 2 new MCCs added to this number, but also another distinction that takes up a lot of page real estate, and that's that the MCCs are now divided into 3 tiers, and each tier has specific criteria that goes with it. And I don't want to go too deep into the weeds with this. I do want to give you an understanding of the tiers and call out some noticeable difference that I see now in VIRP that differs from what we knew in GBPP. For one, the tiers cascade, though there's a caveat statement. When I say the tiers cascade, I mean that acquirers approved for Tier 1 are also approved for Tier 2 and Tier 3, and acquirers that are approved for Tier 2 are also approved for Tier 3. The caveat that I mentioned is that in Tier 1, acquirers are required to seek approval from Visa to participate in each Tier 1 MCC. So for example, if an acquirer is approved to process transactions under MCC 5967, and they want to then expand their offering to include MCC 7273, which is another Tier 1 MCC, if the acquirer did not previously engage in business in that MCC, the acquirer would need to seek approval from Visa for MCC 7273, even though they're already approved to process under 5967, which is also Tier 1. It's a little confusing, I know, but the good news is that there's only 5 MCCs under Tier 1. So Tier 1 includes MCC 5967, adult content, 7273, dating and escort services, 7995, gambling, and I'm going to lump these last 2 together, 5122 and 5912, pharmacies. All 5 of these were included in HBR under GBPP.
Yeah. Shari, if you don't mind me jumping in here, I know you said you weren't planning to go too deep into the weeds on this, but I'd like to hear your perspective about what changes you've seen in these Tier 1 MCCs.
Oh, perfect lead-in, Jamie. So just for funsies, I'm going to start with MCC 5967. Largely, adult content rules remain the same. What I found intriguing was an omission of a sub-bullet. So there's a list of activities that are not considered acceptable by visa, which includes CSAM, incest, bestiality, and rape with a parenthetical, which says, or any other non-consensual sexual behavior. The omission is a bullet that used to appear in GBPP that said non-consensual mutilation of a person or body part. That's a really interesting omission to me. And I suppose it is loosely covered under the rape bullet parenthetical, the, any other non-consensual sexual behavior. I will take this opportunity to remind anyone who plays in this space that MasterCard still holds presence of blood to be a brand violation, consensual or not. And as a best practice, it's a good idea to screen for content, real or implied, live action or animated, wherein any real or potentially lasting physical injury is coming to the actors or models. If you have a contract with a web crawling service like G2 for content monitoring, they are great about catching stuff like this. So that's a wonderful tool to have in your toolbox. Staying on adult content 5967 for just another moment, there are a few language additions that may seem minor, but are still impactful and should be noted. An acquirer must examine content on its merchant's websites to ensure compliance with applicable law, the visa rules, and the requirements of the VIRP guide. This language was included in GBPP. What's different is the addition of the words at least quarterly. And I would think most acquirers have a process in place for this already, but those that don't, it's important to have some sort of documented review conducted on the content of the websites at minimum quarterly. G2 Monthly Monitoring is a great tool to help with this. Upload all of the merchant URLs into G2 and have a monthly scrub of the content done. This would satisfy the at minimum quarterly requirement within VIRP. And another seemingly minor verbal addition is under the section that reads, the merchant must support a complaint process that allows for the reporting of content that may be illegal or otherwise violates the visa rules or requirements of this program guide, and must review and resolve all reported complaints within 7 business days. In the event there is evidence of illegal content, the merchant must remove that content immediately, and buckle up, here comes the new language, and notify their acquirers of the event. These merchants need to be aware that any illegal content that is identified and removed must be reported to the acquirers. And lastly on this MCC, because I'm sure I'm boring you all to death with this, is that there is a brand new bullet on the list that changes the game a little bit for acquirers. The merchant is required to comply with any applicable law requiring viewers of its website to be a certain age and ensure that age verification of the content viewer takes place prior to providing access to the content of its site. That is a big change in perspective. Historically, the acquirer has only ever been held responsible for ensuring age verification of the models or actors within the content. Now, the focus is also on the age verification of the viewership. The wording is really specific here. It says the merchant is required to comply with any applicable law requiring viewers of its website to be a certain age. The only state where I know they have a law for this is Louisiana. It's Act 440 if you want to look it up.
Okay. Well, I can say that was anything but boring. Here you come to a webinar about rules and MCC codes. It does sound like a dry topic, but this definitely has some color there. Great question, Jamie. Thank you for asking it. And wow, Sherry, those are really some great points to highlight about 5967. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Shari, that was great. That was not boring at all. I'm always interested to hear from the client's perspective as well. So I'm wondering, looking at the other MCCs in Tier 1, are there any others that you would point out as being noticeably different from GBPP to VIRP?
I'm glad you asked a question, Jamie. Yes, there's one, MCC 7273 was always part of GBPP, but it never had its own section of specific criteria and requirements called out in the program. The VIRP has section 3.1.2, which is devoted to dating and escort services. And I find it really interesting that out of the 5 bullets, only 1 would apply to both online dating and escort categories. There's 2 bullets in particular that, in my opinion, seem much more applicable to escorts and not at all to online dating. And the bullets I'm referring to are: the merchant is operating in jurisdictions where such services are permissible and performed in a manner that meets all applicable regulatory and licensing requirements. And the bullet that reads, perform an assessment of the merchant's controls to prevent any underage or unconsented participation. As far as escorts are concerned, there are some states like Florida where escorts are illegal. And there are other states like California, which allows escorts to offer services as a fee, but the state requires escorts to apply for licenses to be able to work. This bullet would make quite a bit of sense for an escort operating under MCC 7273. I would have a much harder time applying this to an online dating site, as I personally am not aware of any jurisdictions where dating is not permissible, nor am I aware of any state that requires licensing to be able to date or participate in an online dating website. The same is true for controls to prevent any underage or non-consensual participation. That seems far more applicable to an escort scenario and less so in an online dating scenario. Absolutely, if there is adult content of any kind on the online dating site, those controls need to be in place. So the MCC would likely also shift from 7273 to 5967, and then there would be different criteria altogether. Just food for thought, be aware that there are 2 categories of merchants that fall into this specific MCC, and the requirements appear to largely only apply to one of them. Something to be cognizant of for sure.
Indeed. And for those of you here as attendees, remember at the beginning when I said to buckle up, which I love, Shari, that you also used the term in the middle, or Shari, in the middle of what you were saying. Well, that is what I was talking about. That is a lot of great information, Shari. Thank you so much. I want to ask now, outside of Tier 1 merchants, are there any other things that you would call out about the VIRP that are perhaps different than what we're all used to having seen in the GBPP?
A couple of things, Annie, yes. Most notably, the addition of the 2 MCCs. One is MCC 6012, which has been added to Tier 2 and coupled with MCC 6051, specifically for crypto merchants, exchanges, wallet providers, or on-ramp providers that are card absent with transactions required to use special condition code 7.
Oh, and mind clarifying, what is special condition code 7?
Oh, great question, Annie. I'm so glad you asked. I would love to tell you. Special Condition Code 7 is identified in the Visa Base 2 Clearing Data Codes Manual, published in April of 2023, as the purchase of cryptocurrency for OCT AFT also includes sale or conversion of cryptocurrency to fiat. Of note, MCC 6051 is non-bank financial institutions, and when it's not cryptocurrency and card present, it does not fall under VIRP based on the conditions outlined.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. And are there any others you'd like to point out?
Yes, because I am a never-ending yes. There's one other MCC addition that I think bears on this discussion, and that's MCC 5968. Don't everybody run away all at once. That's negative option subscription merchants, which Visa has added to VIRP under Tier 3. What I want to call out here is that there certainly could be Neutra under this MCC, but there doesn't have to be. This does not appear to be an addition that is targeted at nutraceuticals, in my opinion. MCC 5968 is any subscription merchant, which could be Nutra, but doesn't have to be. And the criteria for registration under Tier 3 VIRP is that it must be card not present and it must be negative option. That's some pretty prescriptive criteria for a broad MCC, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. It does seem prescriptive for something that's meant to be broad. That's interesting. So moving on, what about categories like gambling?
That's an interesting one. So there are a number of MCCs that are suitable for gambling. The VIRP doesn't speak much to a lot of those from a registration perspective, except they name one, and that's MCC 7995 gambling. And again, this MCC is not new to Visa's designation of high risk, whether under HBR in GVPP or HIR under VIRP. Ooh, that's alphabet soup. I want to read the definition as it appears in VIRP because I think it's important. MCC 7995 says betting, including lottery tickets, casino gaming chips, off-track betting, and wagers at racetracks, processing code 11, quasi-cash, internet gambling transactions, government lotteries are not subject to the quasi-cash indicator requirement, and POS condition codes 01, 08, and 59, card not present, mail, telephone order, electronic commerce. Acquirers are reminded that miscoding of internet gambling transactions can result in the entry of illegal merchants and transactions into the payment system. To prevent such activity, acquirers should take the following actions. Conduct regular audits of agents to ensure that they employ proper controls to prevent and detect illegal gambling merchants and ensure all gambling merchants and transactions are properly coded. Now, why am I telling you this? Because 7995 is not the only gambling MCC, and it's certainly not the only online gambling MCC. However, this is being very specific in mentioning that acquirers are reminded that miscoding of internet gambling transactions can be problematic, and regular audits should be conducted to ensure that the proper controls to prevent and detect illegal gambling merchants and transactions are properly coded. I think this is an excellent opportunity for acquirers to look at products and tools available on the market, much like the G2 MCC check product, to help them work to automate some of these checks and balances to ensure that their portfolios are properly classified. By virtue of this language being in the VIRP, it's a safe bet that Visa will be enforcing this. So it's important to make sure that there are not only proper controls in place, but that there's documentary support for those controls. For me personally, G2's MCC check stands apart from some of the others on the market that I've seen in that there's a human being reviewing these merchants and determining what the most appropriate MCC is for each merchant presented. This isn't an AI bot or machine learning. These are real people like Jamie with experience making judgment calls based on industry knowledge. And as much as I see the opportunity for AI, this is an area that I would put more trust in Jamie and her colleagues as a seasoned professional than a machine, at least at this early stage of AI.
Thank you, Shari. I really appreciate you saying that. Like I said earlier, I really consider myself an extension of every client's team. And I know all of you are all counting on me and my experience to get the codes, to get the MCC codes right. For all the reasons that Shari outlined earlier, it really is critical to get this right. Now, I understand some of you may decide to tackle this on your own, but just know I'd be truly happy to become part of your extended team if you need some outside help with your MCCs.
Well, and I think that's a perfect note to close on. Thank you so much, Shari and Jamie. Appreciate so much your effort in both preparing and for this session today, as well as delivering it. This has been a lot of fun. For all of you on the call who took the time to join us today, thank you. do contact us. Our names and email addresses are on the left. And for those of you who would like to learn more, please check out our new guide, Merchant Category Codes, Risk Demystified. This guide explains the importance of MCCs, tracing their evolution from tax-related identifiers into truly valuable tools for managing risk and growth. You'll be able to find the recording of this session and the new guide on the G2 website at g2llc.com. Just navigate over to the resources section, but we'll also include both links in the follow-up email that will come in a few days or next week. That concludes our session for today. If anyone has questions or comments, please make sure to either drop them in the chat here right before we close or email us at our email addresses that you see on the screen or marketing@g2llc.com. Again, that's the Annie hotline. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We've been really pleased to be here with you today. Thanks for joining us, and be well.